Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Direct. I am thrilled because today I am joined with no other than Alan Rice. And if you don't know Alan, Alan has this really wonderful, rich background where he has both sat in the chair as CPO leading procurement teams and helped those same organizations transform leveraging AI. He's got lessons learned, he's got case studies, he's got opinions, and he's not afraid to talk direct. So I am thrilled to have Alan. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Daniela. I really appreciate that warm introduction. I was doing my best not to blush. Oh,
I love it. I love it. Hey, Alan, why don't we start with like a little softball question and to have people get to know you a little bit better. What were you doing when Spain won the World Cup?
jumping up and down. Yeah. Yeah, we went to a watch party. A friend of ours who set up what was it, a 300-inch screen
Oh
down a whole
man.
wall basically. So it felt like we were standing on the sidelines watching the game. So it was thrilling, but it was a nail biter.
It really was. It really was. For those that don't know, Alan is Spanish. My family's from Spain. We've got a deep love of Spain and obviously Spanish soccer.
Yeah.
But no, let's get into it. Alan, there's a lot of things that you've had the privilege of doing in your career. One of them really starting off and running teams and organizations. Since then, right, we've had some really big things happen, like AI has disrupted the space. Talk to me a little bit about what were some of the skills and what you saw work really effectively that now have kind of changed now that AI has come forward and changed how we work.
Right. Yeah, I've been in procurement for a long time. Like I like to tell people that I've been in procurement for so long that I remember what it was like to send out three-ring binder RFPs, right? So you would send them out through snail mail, and so an RFP took back then months. So and then I saw the dot-com era where the first procurement tech came along. Lots of it came along, big explosion within a short period of time, sort of like going on right now with AI. Then came the consolidation, and then funny enough, there wasn't really much progress in procurement supply chain tech, let's say from the early to mid 2000s
Mhm.
all the way up until about 2023. So a huge period of time, like 18, 20 years, nothing really game changer. And then all of a sudden, generative AI hit the market, right? OpenAI, very smart what they did. They decided they would train their model by launching it into the wild. And they did. And it blew everyone away as to what it could do because it was the first time you could actually, most people could have access to an AI. A lot of the time you just seen it in movies. If you didn't work in tech, you didn't really have access to an AI, but they opened it up so anybody would have access to an AI and you could have a
Yeah.
conversation with it, and it felt like you were having in that time you were having a chat conversation. So to your question about what's changed is there was still a lot of manual work going on up until recently, right? So
Yeah.
we automated pieces of the value stream for procurement. So things like the purchase order to invoice space, that all had been automated for the most part, right? And so you had sort of a shopping experience. You could shop catalogs, drag and drop, check out, that type of thing. But everything else that procurement does, the intake of the request to do something, the sourcing, the category management, the negotiating, the contract management, all of that stuff, for the most part, pretty manual, right?
Yeah.
So what's happened in the last 2 years is that that's been flipped on its head. So, I say this a lot, and that is if you take most activities, and it really doesn't matter whether we're talking procurement or any other function in a company, and you divvy it up into three buckets, which is transactional activity, tactical activity, strategic activity. What happened is with this newer tech, most of the transactional and tactical can now be done by the AI. And now the strategic piece, which is the highest value to an enterprise, that's where people can spend their time. So all of this changes that are occurring essentially is, the first step or this first evolution, which let's just say most folks are using to some level. And you ask, what's the big change? People are starting to use generative AI, if they're provided in in their companies with access to an AI like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, then
Yeah.
they use that. Sadly, they figured out that it's so beneficial, and I say sadly for a reason, because that if the company doesn't provide it to them, they use it on their own time
Mm.
with their own license or their own subscription. So that causes a different problem. But that's why companies have to accelerate the usage of it, meaning every company should be having some level of generative AI access to their employees. Because if they don't, they're literally creating a backdoor privacy issue where people are taking, why should I sit here and spend 2 hours reviewing a contract when I can just take it to ChatGPT and it will review it
Yeah.
for me in about a minute and a half.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that people are going to use it either way. Either you
Either
put
way.
the stake. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, anything that kind of shortcuts what I say transactional tactical stuff, especially transactional, which is very kind of repetitive, right? So it can be, you see it a lot in places like marketing, right? Where people spend, they're doing social media marketing. They spend all day
Hmm.
long producing content, publishing content. It's, it used to take time and effort. Nowadays, it's as easy as just basically saying, I'd like you to write, a post on the following topic. And the AI writes it. The person reviews it for a moment. They're usually short posts and it's published. So what's happening with generative AI is a lot of these tasks that are daily tasks, even as something as simple as reviewing your email, you're seeing an 80 to 90% reduction in effort. So when somebody puts something in front of you that's going to reduce 90% of your effort, of course you're going to use it one way or another. Hopefully,
Absolutely.
improved way within the company, but likely not. I have yet to talk to a company whose employees are not using it outside of the office. They're using company content outside the office because the company is not providing the tools that the employee needs.
In order to do it. Yeah. And one of the things that I find really interesting that you've talked about, because you are helping organizations adopt AI in different ways to remove the tactical, to become more strategic. There's something that I found really interesting, and I heard you say it first before anyone else. There's kind of waves to this AI adoption that we're going through. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those waves are and what are the benefits, maybe side effects of a proper and successful implementation that wave
Yeah.
two, wave three affects wave two and wave three?
Yeah. So this is the first tech that's ever come out that moves much faster than most people can keep up. So the
Yeah.
first problem is the tech can do some amazing things, and 95% of people within an organization, their skills are not there yet, right? And so that is a big problem. So because it is moving so fast, what I see has worked the best is sort of an approach, that you've seen for many years out of Silicon Valley, which is basically fail fast. Try it. If it doesn't work, pivot, move into another direction. Well,
Yeah.
big corporations, they're not good at that. They're like, the Titanic trying to change direction. They have a hard time. But, tech companies have been much more nimble, especially the smaller mid-sized ones. So what works really well is for them to just jump in and start trying it. Start, playground, call it whatever you will. Start looking at tech, playing with the tech. What I do a lot with companies, I say, okay, first off, with this tech, the traditional RFP model, it doesn't work. Makes no sense to do an
Yeah.
RFP for your need to use use an AI to solve some solution in your procurement process. You need to see the art of the possible by seeing the tools. So I usually start by getting folks excited by showing them a bunch of tools, right? Tools that
Yeah.
help with onboarding vendors, tools that help with contracts, tools that help with sourcing, so forth and so on, right? That's the first thing is to understand, oh, wow. Because every company's going to have a different pain point. One might
Yeah.
say, my pain point is the user experience. The business does not like to work with procurement because procurement solutions are difficult to use, they're opaque, so forth, so on. You've got others that say the problem is contracting takes too long, right? Or just simply buying something, the process of buying something. Everybody knows that you can buy something at home and essentially have it that afternoon or the next day in your home because you bought it
Yeah.
online. But that same item, if you had to buy the same item from the office for office use, it could take a week.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. Why? Because there's a bunch of processes that are opaque, right? For the inside of a company that an employee somewhere else in the company has no idea of those processes, nor do they care. They just need that, you know, that set of magic markers, whatever the case happens to be. So, so what's happening is that you're seeing these changes now, right? So first we attack what they have the most interest in. But I think what the tech has allowed and what is a relatively newer term for the last, let's say, year and a half, 2 years is called orchestration, right? And that is where you orchestrate a process. Because up until now, when we purchase tech, we purchase this to solve one problem,
Yeah.
manage contracts. But now imagine that we're talking about a process that maybe cuts across either multiple functions within something like procurement or multiple functions within a company. Let's say it crosses operations, procurement, legal, HR, and it's only one function, but each one has their policies. So if you
Yeah.
have an orchestration layer, okay, an AI that basically orchestrates the entire process, that means the user comes in and says, hey, I need a contractor who can do the following thing, and I'm going to need them within 48 hours. At that point, the orchestration layer, the AI, kicks off all the processes very quickly in the background. The person in the business has no idea how many departments are involved in this. You know, HR sourcing the individual, right? You've got they may be you might have operations doing credentials, right? Making sure the person that's coming in has their proper credentials. You're going to have procurement with the paperwork, so forth, so on. There could be different departments. And in today's world, simple things like that, that takes a long time to do.
Yeah. So would you say phase one of this kind of what you've seen organizations go through, and even what you do when you come in and do a full kind of, let's say, AI transformation,
Yeah.
whether it's orchestration or whatever it may be. Phase one is get them excited, see the
Yes.
art of the possible, show them everything that AI can do, and then begin to deploy it so that you can start to test it and create an ROI, and so you can see how it's going to affect either your day-to-day job, your overall, whether it's orchestration or an overall kind of processes within the organization. That's phase one.
Yeah.
How have you seen? Have people been excited about phase one? Does phase one come with kind of open arms, or how are people reacting even to phase one of a transformation?
Phase one, up until recently, has always been the most exciting phase, the one that people
Yeah.
want to, because everybody wants to see what's new. Everybody wants
Yeah.
to see what's possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's important that that first phase also be condensed in time, right?
Okay.
Because most companies can take, just for the purchase of any kind of solution, some SaaS software of some sort, can take 8, 10, 12 months, sometimes as much as 3 years to get it up and running. And
Wow.
people's excitement level and their interest in it kind of wanes over time. So what
Yeah.
I try to
Yeah.
do is that first phase of excitement, of learning, all the way through to what we would call proof of concepts, where they've spent time actually kicking the tires on a solution for a real problem that they have. I try to condense that into 1 quarter.
Okay.
So everything we talked about, wonderful. Now what
Yep.
happens is the next phase kicks in, right? And that's where we are
Yes.
now. And that is that people are starting to realize, wow, a lot of what this does is what I do. So what about me,
Mm.
right? What about me? Because, as much as we want to hire people, when we say it a lot, and a lot of job titles will say you're strategic sourcing or director of strategic planning, or it's always the word strategic. But the problem is they don't typically spend most of their time on the strategic part.
Yeah.
They're brought into tactical, operational issues or just simple firefighting, and that eats up 70, 80% of their time. Yet it's not what their core function is supposed to be, but it's so typical at an enterprise. So in this aspect, when they see this tech, they're saying, some people will look at it and say, wow, I can get to do what I need to do now. Others will look at it and say, this is my job, right?
Yeah.
I'm the one doing risk assessments on vendors, for example. Now all of a sudden the AI is doing it. So what do I do?
Mhm.
You're starting to see now some pushback. Okay. But there's been quite a bit of delay, and this is another piece of it. And it kind of all the thread goes across all of this, but is the upskilling of people. It's not happening fast enough,
Because
and
the
they're not
tech is moving so quickly and things are happening so
companies
fast and
aren't making, and the way they measure if people are keeping up is a little antiquated. So I see this where they say it's how many classes have you taken, or how many times do you log
such a
into
good
a
point.
platform. That's not the measurement you want. The measurement is how many manual tasks or processes have been eliminated by the work you're doing with an AI. And you should see one thermometer start to drop very quickly, out of 300 standard operating procedures, now you're at 250, at 200, at 150, so forth. And you start seeing agents and AIs picking up.
Yeah.
Not a lot are measuring that way.
So if we want to do a little bit of a recap, right? Phase one is about show the people the art of the possible, try quickly and put parameters, right? So try, measure, figure out what the ROI is, put it in front of people, give them a POC, something that they can quickly evaluate the benefits, the trade-offs that are going to
Right.
come from adopting this technology. Make sure you have timelines so that it doesn't become a 3-year assessment, etc. That's phase one, get people excited. Then phase two is deployment. But there's what I'm hearing, which is really one of the first times that I had heard, and we've had this conversation before, Alan, and I'm so excited that everyone else kind of gets to hear this as well. But that phase two, where you're doing kind of first round of rollouts, then there's more art of the possible that you want to test, right? Because there's
Right.
more technology that's being evaluated, but people are approaching the technology and the evaluation process quite differently with something that you just said, which is that there's a feeling of either you get excitement of, oh my gosh, I have all this time to do so much more strategic work, or you get this feeling of kind of doom or dread, or this feeling like AI is going to take your job. So I'm sure you're not the only one. And what do you do? What do you tell CPOs? What do you tell leaders? What do you tell people who are feeling that way or have teams that are feeling that way? So when they go into phase two of, all right, let's try technology, let's try the next wave, how are they interacting? How are people interacting with it? But then
Right.
how are you coaching CPOs?
Well, that's come up quite a bit lately. And what I'm doing now is the first thing is communication, right? They have to communicate really well and continuously. So, and remember that you're not on an island doing this. So in the space where I play, procurement, supply chain, you still partner with a lot of other groups and they should be part of your projects, which is not always the case. You know,
Hmm.
what do you call it? Departments or verticals within a business tend to do things in isolation and then come to you and say, "Look, now you're going to do this," and you had no idea, you had no say in it, and now you potentially might see it as a threat.
Yeah.
So I start off by telling them you've got to communicate a lot, frequently, very transparent, and then the most important thing is the messaging.
Mm.
There's a lot of mixed messaging now in businesses because people see it as a threat, and they're right to understand that some traditional legacy jobs or roles will disappear. What nobody's making clear for them is what's going to appear new. And you have the business saying, we're not doing this for headcount reduction. And most people will not believe that message. So it is better for them to be transparent, not to be gaslit and say, yes, there's going to be an impact on roles because certain roles that have been done by people will now be done by these AIs. Okay. And that's not an if, but it's going to happen. Will it happen now, in a year, or in 3 years? But it's going to happen. And And it already is happening in some industries and in some places. But it is better to say, if you start upskilling yourself, so you become that person that does things 95% faster than your peers.
Yep.
You're the person that they go to ask questions, because the mindset of how you approach and attack a problem is different if you attack it with AI. So sometimes our decades of experience can work against us because we're using our experience to try to attack a problem. When in today's world with AI, it's very possible there's a new approach to look at. So in today's world, those folks that have a few months to a couple of years of experience are going to be those that are very productive. The next level of folks who get past that, when we get to a point where they're 5 to 6 to 7 years of experience, those are the folks that are actually building solutions to business problems. And then
Yeah.
eventually we'll get to a point where people who have 10, 12 years experience with AI and business processes, they are the folks that are managing or orchestrating these processes. So that's the approach that's taken. Nobody knows how many jobs or what kind of jobs are going to exist. Anybody can look it up if they want. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of examples in the past of how things disappeared, uh, and then new jobs appeared.
Yeah.
Now, it's very likely that in today's world, if I need 100 people to do a particular job, I won't need 100 people to do that job anymore. So maybe only 20, throwing out numbers as an
Yeah.
example. But those
Yeah.
other 80, it's not that they won't have roles. It's just that their roles may be different, but that difference may not be at the same company. So I see this now where people that I've worked with in projects who worked on AI projects, and as a natural result of those projects, there was some reductions. Those people moved on to other enterprises, and they moved on very quickly. They moved on very well, and they all understood that one of the factors that made it easy in a difficult job market for them was their knowledge of having implemented AI solutions. So it's a moment where things are changing in the workforce, and you cannot forget the whole change management aspect and upskilling aspect through everything that you do. So when you go through those two phases, you've got to be preparing the people at the same time. Not
Absolutely.
just your
So
own, not just your own.
yeah, that's a really great point. So the first phase, get excited. The second phase is be transparent and be honest. Communication is going to be key, and upskilling is going to be key.
It's critical.
And if it's for the individual person listening, I think what I'm hearing Alan say is do not keep your head down. Do not be a gatekeeper. Instead, welcome it, keep your head up, keep learning, because if even if there is, let's say, a headcount reduction to the thing that we're talking about, which is let's talk direct. There many times will be a headcount reduction. When you go back out to the job market, what Alan is seeing, what I'm seeing is those that have implemented these technologies, that know, that are literate, that have tried, that know the boundaries of where AI is good and what tech is good, and can offer those suggestions, not only get picked up much quicker, but then they are welcomed and celebrated in these new organizations where they land. Right, Alan?
Absolutely. And, if you look at job postings nowadays, they're different now. They've started to become different, especially in the section where they say other skills or other knowledge that they want you to have, right? It used to be where you would see things like, you know, uh, Microsoft Office experience, or must know how to use Excel, or must know how to use PowerPoint. Now what you're seeing is must be comfortable with using AI. But the one that jumps out at me the most, which is relatively new, and it's become more critical than anything else, is the word curiosity. They look for they're looking for people who are curious, because curiosity translates that you're going to look at these newer solutions. And if you're curious at trying to solve a problem, they want you to solve that problem using AI.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
curiosity is important in upskilling, because if you're not curious, it's really difficult to learn something, right? And you have to be optimistic. I mean, and I do believe there's a lot of optimism to be seen in what's going on. There's a lot of dark stuff that you see in the news and in online related to AI. All of it is, they're valid. They're being addressed. You hope they're going to be addressed properly. But at the end of the
Mhm.
day, this is something that's out there. That wave is moving along. It's not going to change. Most everything I see says that these pretty significant changes will happen in the next 3 to 4 years. So the work environment, pretty much everything we would consider to be office work, about 80% of it is impacted. Impacted doesn't mean the roles go away. It means they
Yeah.
change. So departments might be smaller, but leverage more tech. Managers will not only manage people, they will manage agents, right? They will build agents. And the sophistication of the tech right now it's scary. It's pretty scary in the sense that it can speak to you. It can reproduce voices. It can reproduce your own voice. It can reproduce images. I'll tell you right now that a lot of the content you, for example, are seeing now on social media, both personal and business, like LinkedIn, the person you think is speaking is not a person. Meaning the individual who produced the content generated an avatar of themselves. They had the AI clone their voice. And now the way it works is they do a prompt on the subject they want to talk about, the time they want to talk about, and the AI creates the entire video and the entire discussion or presentation. It looks real. It's not.
Yeah.
And the percentage is pretty high now. I literally see it week after week growing and growing.
It is a it feels like wild, wild west, which is why it's so important to have these, these
Right.
conversations and talk direct and tell people really how it is. Ellen, I want to take the last kind of couple minutes for you
Sure.
to have your moment here to brag because I have had the privilege of kind of watching how successful your transformation work and kind of just being parallel listening to some of that work. I want to take a moment for you to kind of highlight some of those successes and what you've been able to do inside of organizations that have come to you and asked for your support and guidance.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, without calling out anybody in specific,
Yeah.
but generally what's been really gratifying is to see, an organization, a large organization, for example, listen and really pay attention to these changes and trust me, for example, enough to move at the speed I'm asking them to move. Because when I come
Yeah.
in to work with them, I'm changing the speed at which they do things. So decision making is more of three people get in a room and you come out with a decision. It's not sleep on it. It's not I'll decide. No, because we have a tight timeline. So I will typically come in and I'll do a review of what their current situation looks like. Then I'll come back with some recommendations. This is what I see, people, process, and tech. This is where you are. And then I'll say, here's what's possible. I understand these are your pain points. How about if we start here? And I might give some recommendations, but then I'm going to give them a really tight timeline, right? We're going to do demos in a week. Oh my
Mhm.
God, right? We're going to do proof of concepts or pilots in a month, right? And most of the time they balk, they don't believe it's possible. Then they get through it and they realize, oh my God, we actually did it. And then implementations are measured in weeks, not months, right? It's not like most of us who've been doing this for a long time know that some of the solutions we've implemented, they can take a year or two to implement.
Yeah.
And the market doesn't stop, your business doesn't stop, but conditions change constantly. We could be in a war, in a pandemic, whatever, and all of a sudden your plans go out the window. So we're in a much more nimble world where you have to be able to pivot no matter what you're doing in a business. So you have to be able to move quickly and understand that most of this tech is evolving so fast that you may decide on a tech, you may select it, you may implement it, and you may replace it a year later.
Yeah. The tech isn't moving fast enough with
It,
how the rest of the market is.
Yeah. So I think I've enjoyed doing that. I enjoy working with companies and trying to help them bridge where they are today with where they have to be. because there's a lot of fear of taking the first step. It's sort of like nobody wants to be the first one on the dance floor. Same for companies, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be out there and make a mistake. But what I like working with them is saying, listen, we're not going to make, unrecoverable mistakes, right? We will make mistakes because that's how we learn. But they're calculated decisions that are made and then pivot very quickly to move forward.
Yeah.
But when you fear a mistake, you are slow to change.
And those that are slow to change are not going to see the success. So what I'm hearing about what you do is you come in, you do an assessment of where they are, you quickly identify where the opportunities and pain points are. And but I mean quickly, I genuinely mean that. We're talking about weeks, not months of an
Correct.
assessment period. And then it's about deployment. And the focus of deployment is make decisions quickly and tie them all the way back to ROI and the benefit to the business and the problems that you're facing, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Alan, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, ask you more questions, really maybe see if there's an opportunity for collaboration, where can they find you? How can they find you? How can they stay in touch?
Yeah. I mean, they can find those that have LinkedIn accounts. They can find me on LinkedIn, Alan J. Rice. They can also come to my website, cacheprocurement.com. You'll find a lot of content there. This is where I publish the article, where I post the articles that I publish, the podcasts that I do, that type of thing. So it's all there. And they can send me a note through there, but it's pretty easy, either LinkedIn you know, or
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Alan. I really appreciate you being here, talking so direct. Please, if you've enjoyed this, make sure you follow along. We've got an incredible lineup for Let's Talk Direct. Make sure you reach out to Alan via LinkedIn or on his website, and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much.
thank you.